Good evening, members. Welcome to tonight's Licensing and Appeals Committee. We've got three items on the agenda tonight. Sorry, more than three items. But we'll start with apologies, please, Tommy.
So, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Donnelly, Murphy, Cruz, Allison and Councillor Grethwick.
Thank you. Public participation. There's no members of the public here. Approval of last meeting's minutes, please. Anybody to move it? Councillor Lees. Second, anybody? Councillor Wakeman. Thank you. Interests, members. Any interests? Oh, sorry. All those in favour, please show. Abstentions. Thank you. Got that. Interests. Members, no interests? No. Right, we'll carry on with the taxi and private licensing hire proposed increase to the table of maximum fares for taxis. Eileen, please.
Just speak.
No, you need that one.
Thank you. Well, that was a bit scary. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, so this first report then that we have before you is to provide the committee with an update on the District Council's, or on a review of the District Council's current table of maximum taxi fares. We had a request a while ago from the taxi trade, the local taxi trade, to ask whether or not it was about time the taxi fares were increased. They haven't had an increase since 2011. So, under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, a local authority does have powers to review and set the fares. The fares charged by drivers of private hire vehicles, are not regulated by the District Council. Generally speaking, a private hire operator negotiates a fare with the customer direct. Some private hire vehicles do have taxi meters fitted through choice, and if they do, then obviously they would be bound to use our tariff as well. So, over the last few months, we've had a couple more requests. I mean, obviously the cost of living, the dramatic increase in the price of fuel has probably exacerbated more requests for us to consider a review of the maximum fares more seriously. So, what's happened during the last couple of months since the committee in January, when we were talking about this, we've spoken with members of the trade. We threw out invitations to the drivers as a whole, the Hackney drivers, that is, as a whole, for them to meet up with us and perhaps to agree at a proposal that we could advertise so that the public could comment on it, or anybody could comment on it, and that we could bring back here to members. I'd say that probably about 25% of our Hackney carriage, which are the taxi drivers, the ones that sit on ranks or can pick up in the street, engaged with us in those discussions. So we had 4 proposals from various sectors of the taxi trade, and basically what we did as officers, with permission from the committee some time ago, we sat down with the trade and we talked about the 4 proposals, and then we advertised those 4 proposals to all the taxi trade, including those that couldn't attend any meetings, just to get a feel really for which proposal they were happy with. The proposal that we've published in the agenda at point 1.5 on point 1.11 on page 5 of your papers was a sort of middle of the road proposal. So we had a proposal that where the T1 flag, that's tariff 1 flag, was shown as £3.50 for the first mile and then so much per mile. And then we had one that was more expensive than this middle proposal, where the T1 flag would have been £3 for the first mile, but it would incrementally through the first mile go up to £5.40. How the taxi fare is sort of measured, judged nationally, is over a 2 mile journey, and basically you'll see in the tariff one in paragraph 1.11, over the 2 mile distance, tariff 1 would be £6.40. Now at the moment, that tariff, which is shown in Appendix 1 of your agenda, I think it's £4.80. And at £4.80, it makes Derbyshire Dales district I think it's either the 11th or 12th lowest fare charging authority in the country. So there are 355 authorities that set taxi fares. It makes us quite low down. I mean, obviously some of the top ones are going to be the big large cities in the south of the country. We as officers, as I say, the trade that responded to say that they felt tariff, this proposal, which was our second proposal, where the tariff 1 starts at £4, so that's for a normal journey. If you were getting a taxi any time during the day and you were going a short distance or whatever, then it would start at £4, and as it went past the 1 mile, it would click up during the first mile, I presume in 15p increments, until you got to the second mile, whereby then the extra £2.40 would clock in. That would make, if that proposal was accepted, if this proposal was accepted, it would make the Derbyshire Dales District Council's fares somewhere around 150th out of the 355, rather than down at the bottom. It's possibly fair to say that because we're such a rural area, there's an awful lot of what the taxi drivers tell me is dead mileage, which you wouldn't get in a city centre. So in a city centre, taxis are picking people up very, very regularly. They're doing short journeys. They're making them probably the 1-2 mile fee, but fare, but they're making a lot of them. Whereas if a driver here was asked, somebody in, say, I don't know, Wirksworth telephoned for a taxi, the taxi would have to come out of Matlock or wherever, go to Wirksworth, and then coming back, it's not going to pick anybody up. Whereas in a city centre, hackneys would be dropping people off, and then they would be picking people up and going on another journey. So that's kind of how the difference works. I've had quite a lot of discussions with the Derbyshire authorities about whether or not they were going to increase their fares. We've reported here in the table at 1.10 on page 4 what the fares in other authorities in Derbyshire are at the moment. According to the Private Hire Monthly magazine, they do a table and they update it every month. I'm led to believe, since this was published, that Derby City have increased their fares. I don't know what to. I haven't had time to investigate that, but they've recently increased their fare, and I'm led to believe as well that Amber Valley Borough Council are now looking at theirs. I've spoken with one of the meter companies that's in Nottingham, which quite a few of our drivers use, not all of them, and he tells me, because he works for licensing authorities or works with licensing authorities across the country, that there is a huge number of authorities where the taxi trade have asked for their fares to be increased. So it's not just Derbyshire Dales, and it's not just because it's 11 or 12 years ago since we did one. It's to do with it is to do with the rising cost of living and the rising costs in running a business. So once we've agreed a fare with the trade that they're happy with, and the officers delegated by yourselves are happy with ish, then we need to advertise it. Now the legal requirement isn't a full-blown consultation where you put it out for 3 months etc. It's the legal process is apparently very simple according to the law. Basically, you publish the table in a newspaper for 14 days. That's the minimum. I mean, some authorities may choose to do it longer, but generally speaking, it's 14 days. Assuming that nothing is advertised on our website now, you know, I mean, a newspaper's slightly antiquated way of advertising things, so we've put it on the website, we've put it out at our offices so that people can read about it, and we leave it for 14 days. Any objections have to be considered, so they can be considered by officers, they can be considered by committee. If the objections can't be resolved, then they would have to come to a committee anyway, which would then require, well, it would then result in a delay of a decision, because those objections it would probably be another couple of months before that meeting could be held. So what we've done, because this, you know, it has been happening for quite some time now. What we've done is we advertised this last week, so we've had a week's worth of advertisement already, with an end date of next week, the 7th of July. To date, we've had quite a lot of support on Facebook to the trade, for the trade, having this increase. We've had one email of support to the actual tariff 1 starting at £4, not a problem with that, but did question whether or not the increase of £2.40 for each additional mile, which is an increase from, I think it was £1.80 on the old tariff for an additional mile. Yeah, it was. Whether or not that's too much. I mean, that's possibly for you to decide. I mean, basically, as officers, what we would say is that we're trying to future-proof this increase for the next 2 to 3 years, and to increase, say, from the £1.80 per additional mile to only £2 or maybe £2.20 and not £2.40 could end up with us having to come back in a year or 2 years and ask for another increase to be agreed. So I've outlined on page 5 things you might wish to consider. I mean, I don't need to read through those, but basically the main one is, I suppose, that we haven't had a fair increase for nearly, in fact, it might be nearly 12 years now, nearly 11 years. I think we should take into account that had the trade requested an increase every 3 or 4 years between 2011 and now, and if they'd only asked for a 25p increase to the main tariff 1, it would have gone up from £3, £3.25 and so on up to £4. We would be at that stage now anyway. I suppose the idea is taxi drivers have been reluctant to ask for a request, because obviously they know it will affect their customers as well, but there comes a point at which, you know, if the businesses are to continue, and we haven't got a huge number of taxis in Derbyshire Dales as we used to have. I mean, we've probably got, I think I've said in the report, 98 hackneys. A lot of those don't operate locally during the day. They might in the evenings, at weekends. So there is a limit. So what we're asking, Chair, in terms of what we are asking is, we're asking that for confirmation of the action that officers have taken in agreeing the revised table, and it is maximum fares, and that does need to be stressed. So there are some drivers who may not have spoken out, but may still not want the fares to be increased, but basically they don't have to charge the maximum fare. So if they've got regular customers who they use their taxi quite a lot and they want to agree a lesser fee, then there's nothing to stop them doing that. But there has to be a consistent approach somewhere, and that's the maximum. So it's not, you're not allowed to charge more than the maximum, whatever. So if that could be confirmed that that table that we agreed was okay, or the action taken was okay. We're also then looking that for that proposed table to be approved, and for the implementation of the new tariff to be agreed. I mean, that can't be before next Thursday, obviously, because we can accept comments up until next Thursday. We would need or suggest delegation to the Director of Regulatory Services to consider any comments, if any more comments were to be received between now and then. And that thirdly, we would ask then that members would consider the table of maximum taxi fares being reviewed every 3 years, rather than waiting so long. I don't know if Tim's anything else to add to that, Chair. I don't know.
Thanks. So the only thing I would add in relation to the review is not to say we would definitely increase the fares every 3 years, but we make a point of noting what the taxi trade thought at that time and whether they wanted to request an increase, which would then be brought to a meeting of this committee.
Thank you. Is there any questions, members? Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Arlene. I'm a bit surprised it's 11 years since they've gone up, but that is surprising, and I think that is going to make the impact of any increase, which I've just calculated is about a 33% increase on from the existing to the new. It's going to make it somewhat more impactive, if you know what I mean. But if it's publicised correctly, I think that is something that's reasonable. I'm just asking on a. I mean, it'd be interesting to know how much the fuel costs is impacting on this. But on a more, the council is committed to a climate emergency, climate change, and I'm just wondering how many taxis have we got on the fleet that are electric, and what as an organisation are we doing to promote taxi drivers to use more environmentally sound vehicles? That's one of the questions that I was just wondering. The second one, I'm glad you brought it in about the maximum charge. Am I right in thinking that if you've got a taxi driver who picks an elderly person up, or a young person, or whatever person up, whenever they want to pick them up, it's at their discretion? So it is a maximum charge that if it's somebody that they've been driving around for years, they can charge whatever they want, and it is a maximum charge that we are going to levy on them if they wish to. Those are the two questions for now, but I would like to, if needs be, come back in any sort of debate. Thank you.
So, through you, Chair, if I just answer the second one first, because that's the easier one. The answer is yes, really. It is a maximum. It's a table of maximum fares. If a driver wanted to charge his regulars less, yes, he can. If indeed you went to the rank and you asked, and you weren't a regular, and you asked a hackney, how much is it to such and such, he may well say to you, well, that would be £20 on the meter, but I'm happy to do it for 15. He could do that, but he would have to put the meter on to reassure the customer that they were being charged less. So yes is the answer to that one. That's the easy one. The second one, I can't get on my system, unfortunately. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think we've got any pure electric vehicles on our fleet from the last return I did to the DFT. I'm not 100% sure without being able to look, but I know we have got a handful, if that, of hybrids. With regard to what we're doing about that, I'll pass over to Tim.
Hopefully in the not too distant future, Councillor Battle, there'll be a meeting of the Climate Change Working Group. I'll ask Joe to sort out something for the next couple of weeks. And one of the things we'll be bringing there is an interim strategy on electric vehicles, which will cover a number of things. The main reason we'll be bringing that is because we need such a strategy in order to bid for a particular pot of funding, which is aimed at putting more charging points on car parks. but it will also deal with some other issues, what we're doing with the fleet, and at the very end of it, what we're proposing to do in relation to taxis. There has been an engagement guide brought out by National Energy Action, I believe it is. Jo will correct me when I get back to the office tomorrow and she tells me it was somebody else, but I believe it's National Energy Action about encouraging electric vehicle take-up in the taxi fleet. And the first thing that it says is to engage with the taxi trade and try and encourage and make them aware of the opportunities that electric vehicles offer. We've done some of that already. Jo's held one workshop event, 2 workshop events with taxi drivers, and we'll continue to do that. We're also proposing that we will start to introduce maybe incentives in terms of lower fees for electric vehicles, or low emission vehicles I should say, and that ultimately we'll be making changes in our policy which will encourage, I think our view is encourage rather than enforce, mandate, the take-up of low emission vehicles over a quicker timescale than would naturally be the case with the phasing out of internal combustion engines. So we are looking at it. It's not fully developed. It's fair to say that the engagement with taxi drivers was mixed in the first case. They weren't all necessarily chomping at the bit to buy electric vehicles, but we will keep working on it. Jo will be doing that work with Eileen.
Can I just come back on my question? Thanks. So are we aware, or I mean, I can totally understand, you know, people, taxi drivers in London driving from Essex because it's cheaper to live, but they've still got electric cabs. Some of them have. I'm pleased to hear about you saying about incentivising, but I just think, well, the follow-up question was basically, are we aware of what Amber Valley, and I'm thinking of like for like, Amber Valley or High Peak, we don't know what their take-up is yet. It's early stages, because I can imagine in Derby City, they would want to have, it's a lot easier to drive around a city with an electric vehicle. But I mean, like for like, Amber Valley or High Peak or North East Derbyshire, I just wondered if they are taking on more, and I'm really pleased to hear that we are pushing it, and we definitely need to be doing as much as we can. I'll shut up now, thank you.
To be fair, that's a good question. We understand our neighbouring authorities are in a similar position to us, and any take-up is purely ad hoc. We are, you know, it's Jo, so she's going to work at it, and it will happen in some form or another. The main barrier taxi drivers brought to our attention was actually initial cost and absence of a second-hand market for electric vehicles at the moment.
Yeah, if I can just update you now, actually, I've managed to get on the system. So Hackneys, the taxis that sit on the rank and can be picked up, we've got 6 hybrids on the fleet, and private hire vehicles, there are 9 hybrids. There are no electrics, fully electrics.
Any more questions, members? Okay. Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Essentially, I'm really quite keen on allowing taxi drivers to make a decent living. But how many of these journeys that they're taking are essential journeys, things like taking children to school? And what's the likelihood of these changes cutting into the incomes of people who are struggling?
So through you, Chair, if I just answer the bit about the schools. I mean, there is one private hire operator in Derbyshire Dales, which is quite a big company. It's part of a national company, and they have a lot of contracts with Derbyshire County Council with the special needs transport, vulnerable people transport. They're a big fleet, and they've got a big fleet of drivers, for want of a better expression. I guess are you talking about the small one-man band taxi people who perhaps take children to your ordinary regular school?
That was kind of where I was thinking. I knew about the Derbyshire County Council one was kind of a separate business.
Yes, yeah. I mean, to be honest, Chair, I don't know the answer, because I don't know if the taxi trade, the general taxi trade, are doing it as part of a school contract anyway. or whether they're being paid by the family. So I can't really answer that question.
Certainly, we've tried to encourage our regular trade to bid for the Derbyshire County Council contract stuff, but more and more it tends to be won by the bigger operator that we operate with, who is, as you'll see in the next report, is a source of great income to the taxi licensing service. In relation to school transport, it tends to be private hire operators who aren't bound by our table of fares anyway. So if a family is looking to negotiate a fare to take their child to school, they're not forced to stick to the maximum fees, as Councillor Wayne pointed out. They are maximum fees. I think what we're trying to do with this is balance the fact that the cost of living crisis at the moment has impacted on everybody, with the need to maintain a viable taxi fleet in the area, and clearly looking at a table of fares that's 11 years old, it would suggest it is time for an update. Quite agree about that. So it's a balancing act. Clearly an increase in taxi fees will have an impact on those people who use them. And we'll listen to any concerns that come up as a result of that, I guess. Certainly if anything comes up in relation to the advertisement at the moment, then we'll make you aware of that. Nothing has in that respect. He's showing me a note which I can't now read.
Thank you, Tim. I was just going to say one of the points as well, Councillor Buttle, is that we have a 10-year limit on the vehicles that we licence.
Yes.
At the moment, and obviously under normal circumstances that's not really been a problem, but the last couple of years the price of second-hand cars has risen dramatically, and whilst we don't want to deviate from the policy and extend that to allowing 11, 12, 13-year-old cars to be on the fleet, in order for them to be able to make up the difference, to be able to change their cars when they get to the 10-year limit, that's also another factor of the increased fare request.
So I can't, we can't say that the increase in fares will not impact upon anybody, because clearly they will. If anybody came forward to us with particular vulnerabilities that were caused as a result of this, we'd try and sort out what we could on a case-by-case basis. I don't think I can say any more than that, really.
Thank you very much, Tim. That's exactly what I thought you would say. I have another question. When we had 20% of drivers or whatever come to you to say, could we rethink the fares, that makes sense. I don't blame them at all. And then we're looking at leaving it another 3 years before we look at the numbers again. What happens if we hit 15% interest rates and £3 a gallon? Could we allow this to be brought forward by popular demand? The reassessment?
I mean, you're right. It's a point we've talked about as well. We put 3 year in as a backstop position, really. None of us knows what's going to happen with petrol prices, fuel prices, inflation in general over the next 12 months, do we? So if the taxi drivers come to us and make another request ahead of that 3 year time, we're on about to consider it. And if there is a case there for an increase, we'll bring it before members.
And one final question. Did I just say £3 a gallon or £3 a litre? I meant £3 a litre.
Any more questions, members? No. We'll move into debate. Councillor Wayne. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, say 11 years has been a long time, hasn't it? And so I'm fully in support of this, what we're proposing, and hopefully it will keep those taxi drivers in business and keep them working, because I think without it, I think we'll be losing even more of them due to the fact they won't be able to afford to run the taxis. So I'm supportive of this proposal, and I'll move it if it needs moving. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Does that find a second? Councillor Wayne?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to be fair, a 33% rise sounds a lot, but at the end of the day, it's keeping people in business, and more importantly, it's keeping vulnerable and isolated people mobile. That's the most important thing. Now, it is an actual maximum figure. It's at the discretion of the taxi driver if they want to charge that. But I do feel that I'm in support of the 3 recommendations that are mentioned on the actual agenda item. And I just think we as an organisation need to be seen to be fair, and I think we are, because when I looked at the table, I would be interested to know how many of those, like at High Peak Borough Council at £6.60, whether they'd already put theirs up already. Because if these people do put theirs up, we're going to be very low.
Through you, Chair, I believe that those figures, they were the latest were June, and I haven't heard from anybody other than Amber Valley and Derby that anybody else in Derbyshire is planning to put them up yet.
Yeah. So I'm more than happy to second it. Thank you.
Very good. And any more comments? No. We'll go to the vote. Moved and seconded. All in favour? Tommy. Very good. Right, we'll move on to the next item. Taxi and private hire licensing update annual update report. Please, Eileen.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. So this is a report that we bring to the committee, usually the first meeting of the civic year, just to give you an update and a comparison over the last couple of years' work relating specifically to taxi and private hire licensing. So some members will remember that the council adopted its latest taxi licensing policy in 2018. There were some mandatory requirements within that policy which we've continued to implement. One in particular is safeguarding awareness training for our drivers, for all new drivers. COVID interfered somewhat with the programme of refresher training for the existing drivers, and it also hampered us a little bit with new drivers, but I'm pleased to be able to say that we have actually caught up now with a lot of the new drivers, certainly a lot of new drivers who are doing the 24/7 limited special needs school contracts. We've had to train those and some passenger assistants, and we've caught up with those. I suppose looking at the table in 1.6, paragraph 1.6, that gives a bit of an indication of the number of applications for different licence types that we've received and dealt with. You'll see that the first entry for Hackney carriage vehicles, so they're just taxi licences. We only dealt with 30 applications for those in 2021. That was obviously while COVID was happening, and a lot of drivers didn't renew their licences, or they took their vehicles off until such time as business picked up again. So you can see in 21-22 that number rose up to 71, which was a significant hike, but good. The driver licences again was a similar situation. We issued combined driver licences here at Derbyshire Dales. That allows a taxi driver to drive both types of vehicles, so they can drive a Hackney, a taxi, or they can drive a private hire vehicle. We, as members, some members will remember a couple of years ago when we were approached by the company 24/7 Limited to be able to do school contracts. In particular, they put in a lot of applications for new drivers to set up the business. So in 2021, they had 17 drivers, but then by 21-22, that number has risen to 35. And overall, that company, which is located, the base for this operator is located in Wirksworth. They've now got something in the region of 60 drivers who are licensed to carry out school contracts for Derbyshire County Council, and they've probably got similar number of licensed vehicles as well. And they're a company that do they do license a vehicle for a short period of time, brand new vehicles, for 4,000 miles or 6 months. So in actual fact, every one of those licenses is actually is the equivalent of 2 other licenses, because most people license them for 12 months, license the vehicles. You'll see in paragraph 1.7 we've mentioned licensing and appeals subcommittee, taxi hearings. So a taxi hearing is usually held where a driver, either their criminal record disclosure or their driving license disclosure what's the word there, highlights that they've got either points or convictions or cautions, in which case if they can't be disregarded in line with the council's policy for considering convictions, then they would normally be referred to committee. And you'll see that during 21-22 we only had to bring 1 driver or 1 prospective driver before committee, and that was a matter of speeding points, or points on their licence for speeding. I talk a little bit about the Department for Transport's National Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Standards. So the reason being that that's been discussed in detail at the last meeting in January and the meeting prior to that, which I think was last October. We've got quite a lot of work to do on implementing some of those standards, and we've still got quite a bit of work to do on implementing those standards. So whilst we've started looking at some of the issues, we're hoping to bring back a full report to the September committee, because it will require some policy changes as well. So we will have to go out to consultation on those and hopefully bring that back to September for members to consider, with a view really to trying to bring it in by January next year. I think Tim's going to talk to you about the financial side.
Yeah, you'll notice that there's a table of finance, a table of numbers in the financial comments at the bottom of page 11. I had a look at this before coming to the meeting, and the figure for direct costs in 21-22 stands out like a sore thumb. I think that's an error. These figures have come from the accounting systems. I think that's an error. I think that should actually be £26,900. And the support costs would be reduced accordingly to just under, to 9,000 and some odd. I'll take that up with Karen tomorrow, and we'll make sure that the minutes contain a correct notification of that, so that you've got those figures. The reason I was looking at it is I particularly wanted to look at the change in income, and you can see that the income figure for 21-22, which I do believe is correct, and that relates largely to the large number of applications that Eileen and her team have been dealing with for the Special Educational Needs Transport Company, which is good to see. I mean, quite apart from the money, it's providing a service for the whole of the county and making sure that there are sufficient drivers and passenger assistance to take what in some cases can be quite vulnerable young people to their places of education. So I think, quite apart from the money, I think we're doing a good deed there for the rest of the county as well. But I'll make sure that figure's corrected, or that figure's confirmed or corrected in the minutes, and make sure Tommy and his team know about it.
Good. Any questions, members? Councillor Buttle.
I noticed that Angelique Foster was talking about increasing CCTV in our taxis, and I don't see any mention of this here. Did that just fall by the wayside?
Tim.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. This committee did consider it a while back. At the time we considered it, there was no evidence to support mandating CCTV in taxis. Interestingly, Chesterfield Borough Council considered the issue last week, and they've also concluded that there's no evidence in Chesterfield to support mandating it, which isn't an answer for here, but it's interesting to consider in comparison, isn't it? I mean, in reality, it's going, as we said when we considered it before, it's going to come at some point. It's going to happen either organically or through requirement, and we need to be alive to that possibility and respond accordingly. We have there's a new licensing team at our police colleagues now, and we're beginning a relationship with the new officers there. We've met the new officer for the area a couple of weeks ago, and we'll continue to talk to them about this and other issues that relate to licensing. If there does become any evidence to suggest it should be mandated, then we'll bring that back before you.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a good answer, and I think I have to agree with it. You know, don't do it unless you have to.
Any more questions, members? We'll go into debate.
I'll move it.
Councillor Wakeman.
I'll move it, please, Chair.
Anybody second that? Councillor Lees. Any more comments, anybody? Go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to the last item, Licence Act 2003 and Gambling Act 2005 annual update. Please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So again, this is an annual report that we bring to generally the first meeting of the new year, new committee year, to members. This report provides a summary of the work relating specifically to activity under the Licensing Act 2003 and the Gambling Act 2005. The financial aspect of it compares the current financial year with the last two financial year periods. As the report says, Chair, each year a number of new licences are granted, new premises licences are granted to allow the sale of alcohol and the provision of regulated entertainment and late night refreshment, and a small number are surrendered as businesses close down or move premises. Looking at the closed down surrendered premises licences, that to be fair, 1819 was pre-pandemic, and 1920 was sort of as pandemic was starting. There wasn't a huge rise in the number of premises that did close down, and since then we haven't seen a big close down of premises. Most of them have transferred the businesses, so the numbers for transfers in 2021-22 are quite high for normal years. I mean, they're not high compared to 1920, but they are for normal years, and that's probably because some businesses just diversified and other people took over those businesses and changed them into other types of establishments. Right. Sorry, subcommittee hearings. So when we get, I mean the table in 1.7 is kind of self-explanatory. That's listing the various types of licenses that we issue under the legislation, and then comparing the years. I mean the one probably of most interest is the temporary event notices, and they're the occasional licenses that people have for one-off events. With less than 400 or less than 500 capacity. So generally speaking, you'll see from years 2018, 19 and 19, 20 that we generally deal with somewhere between 450 and in a good year 550 of those. Obviously the pandemic year 2020-21, we only had 64 of those notices given, because most of the one-off events, including weddings and parent-teacher association and church fetes, etc., they were all cancelled due to COVID, so we didn't receive the temporary event notices. 21-22, the numbers are starting to rise, and the team are dealing with probably something between 25 and 30 of those every week at the moment, because people are trying to catch up with the cancelled events from the last couple of years. licensing and appeals subcommittee hearings are generally held for premises licences, particularly new premises licences that are being applied for, where a premises that wants to sell alcohol and perhaps wants to sell it quite late on into the evening may give rise to objections. However, during 2020-2021, we received 3 applications for premises licences and 1 for a temporary event notice, and these were all referred to the Licensing and Appeals Subcommittee on receipt of objections. So all 3 applications all 3 applications were actually related to music festivals in the district. So we had a premises licence for a small music festival, proposed small music festival at Pike Hall, and that one was referred to committee. And then we had a premises licence for a little bit bigger festival that was proposed for Darley Moor Airfield, and that was also referred to committee. That premises licence, as some members will be aware, was refused by the committee, and the applicant did appeal to the Magistrates' Court. And in actual fact, that was refused, I think, was it? Yeah, that one went to the Magistrates' Court, and it was up. The council's decision was upheld. He didn't appeal that decision. The applicant for that festival actually then gave a temporary event notice, which meant the event would be much smaller than a premises licence. It would be less than 500 people. But again, that received objections from our environmental health team, and that came back to committee more recently, and that was refused. He didn't appeal that one, so now that matter is actually closed. And we generally, in a year, I would say we probably only get 1 or 2 applications that would come before you. And generally, past experience is that if a licence is granted and people are unhappy about it, or it isn't granted and people are unhappy about it, and it's referred to the magistrates' courts, generally speaking, the magistrates have upheld the council's decisions. Speak a little bit, Chair, about working with partners. Tim's alluded to the fact that we fall under Chesterfield, the North Division of Derbyshire Constabulary, and the licensing team of police officers there has recently changed. 3 or 4 officers that have been there quite a while have left for various reasons, retirement, other posts, other authorities. And they've all recently just taken up posts, the new police officers. So we're hoping to strike up the same relationship we had with the previous licensing police officers and carry out a lot of the joint visits that we've done of our licensed premises and with them and with trading standards. So over the last couple of years anyway, our visits to licensed premises have been curtailed somewhat with COVID, and we're hoping to get that programme back up and running again, where we can go out and see as many of our licence holders as we can. Moving on to the Gambling Act. I mean, the Gambling Act's obviously we've got a lot fewer, or we've got many fewer premises that we licence under the Gambling Act. At the moment, I think the bookmakers number is reduced to 3 now, actually, because we did have another one in Matlock that closed down. So we just have 1 bookmakers in Ashbourne, 1 in Bakewell, 1 in Matlock. We have family entertainment centres, which are the arcades in Matlock Bath. They're long-standing. And we issue a lot of small society lottery registrations, which are like a licence to be able to run raffles and similar. A lot of those are issued to schools and PTAs and local charities, etc. That number remains fairly static year on year, even though during COVID, I don't think many events were held where they were required to have a licence. They kept the licences going so that they could use them this year as we come out of it. We did during the last year, we've reviewed and republished the gambling policy. there is a likelihood that we're going to have to look at that before 3 years. It's not due for review again until 2025, but I think because the Gambling Commission have made some changes to a lot of their codes of practice, etc., which could have an effect on our local policies, then we're going to probably have another look at that and review it and perhaps go out to consultation with that one. In paragraph 3 or section 3 of the report on page 16 of your papers, I've talked about licence statistics. It's fairly it is fairly self-explanatory. Obviously there are statutory returns that we have to submit to government in relation to gambling and in relation to alcohol licences. Again, during COVID, they gave us a bit of grace where we didn't have to have those returns completed, and since then we've submitted them again. They do collate them, obviously, and they produce a report which, generally speaking, that would come back to a later committee in the year when they've finished collating that information. I don't know if Tim wants to talk about the financial side of the report.
You make me sound like I'm always looking at money stuff. I believe these figures are correct. The interesting thing to note perhaps is that the dip in income in 2021, which is perhaps not surprising. If you look at the table of licences that's further up the report, you'll notice that, for example, there were practically no temporary event notices during that period. There was much less going on. And that obviously resulted in a dip in income. There is an increase in income in 21-22, which partly is accounted for by temporary event notices coming back online and people beginning to return to their pre-pandemic lives and having the things that they had before them, which is I guess, a good thing. Also takes account of an increased fee from the Why Not Festival as a result of them increasing their capacity from a maximum of 30,000 people to a maximum of 40,000 people. So that accounts for the increased income. I merely mention it really because A, the money's good, and B, it's good to see that a sort of more vibrant life is returning, hopefully after the pandemic.
Any questions, members? Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just looking at table 1.7, I noticed that quite a drop in, well, not a big drop, but there's a drop in personal licences as opposed to quite a few other activities. Is there a reason why people aren't applying for personal licences, or has it been made more difficult, or just seems that there's not many applying?
Yeah, through you, Chair. No, the system for getting applying for a personal licence has stayed the same. I think again what happened was people veered away from the hospitality trade during COVID, so we did see a dramatic drop in personal licences, and it's on the up now. We are getting them back in, but I don't think we're going to get them in the numbers that we were getting them in. But there's no other reason.
Any more questions, members? Councillor Buttle.
This is not really very exciting. Is a family entertainment centre, is that a bingo hall?
Well, no, not really.
Right.
In Derbyshire Dales, what it is, a family entertainment centre is an arcade. So in Matlack Bath, it's the arcades with the low stakes, low prizes. You know, your tuppenny and your.
I know the sort of thing.
So an adult gaming centre, and we have the one at the moment, is a similar sort of thing, but the machines are large stake, large payout, and only over 18s can use those.
Do we have a bingo hall?
Not as such, no.
It's a gap in the market.
We don't have a casino either, sadly, because they've got very, very high fees, very high application fees.
Thank you very much.
No more questions? Moving to debate. Councillor Wayne.
I can't believe it's a year since we looked at this last time. It flies by, but Thanks very much for doing all the reports. I'm happy, if that's all in order, to move this report for the recommendations outlined. It's reassuring from my part that some, and not necessarily enforcement, but monitoring is once again going to be undertaken. I think that is important, and that will have a necessary ripple effect if people are being checked, because we don't know whether there are rogue traders out there. We sincerely hope not, but I'm more than happy to move it as the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Does that find a second from somewhere? Councillor Buttle.
I'd love to second this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moved and seconded, so that's passed. Very good.
All in favour?
Yeah, sorry, all in favour? Thanks for that. Unanimous. Thank you. Very good. And that concludes tonight's meeting, members. Thank you very much.
Do you want him to sign?
Yeah, before you leave, I've got an attendance sheet here. I don't know if we'd like to have to sign it. Do I need to sign? Well, I don't know. I've never seen one before. Do I have to sign this? Last time's. Is it last time's minutes?
Sign all the sheets.
Oh, all the sheets.